Hey, here we go. I guess we are online now.
Yep.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the next dev.life online session, brought to you as usual by Liferay, and especially by the developer relations team at Liferay, which you can always contact at developer-relations@liferay.com. Today we're gonna have a very interesting session, but as usual, I'm gonna take 5 minutes of your time before the session to tell you a few interesting things for the people who are here for the first time and may not know how all this works. So the guy talking to you from the corner of the screen, it's me. My name is Miljan Yankov, and I'm developer advocate at Liferay, and I've been lucky to host these sessions for you and invite guests who can talk to you about interesting subjects. Those topics are mostly oriented around the variety of projects that we at Liferay have, not limited to. Sometimes we talk about the technologies that we use or we contribute to. And today's session is one of those sessions where you will see that we also contribute to other projects. So if you want to learn more about what we do at Liferay, go to community.liferay.com/projects, and you'll see all of our projects listed there. Most of you probably came here through our meetup, and if so, then you know that this is Liferay dev.life email, where you can sign up and be notified about new sessions. If you also want to participate in a live meetups about any of the topics that we cover, you can look around at the meetup/pro/Liferay, which is going to show you all the local meetups that we have around the world. Here is an announcement. We just have a new user group in Portugal. So if any of you is in Portugal or can go to Portugal, please sign up and participate in local meetups in Portugal. For today, as for every other sessions, we wanted to keep it as much interactive as we can. And as usual, there's two ways to talk back to us. This is the chat on YouTube channel. It should be next to the video screen, and you can use that. Or you can use our dev.life channel on our community Slack. You have both the URLs on the screen, and they should be also provided under the video on YouTube and in the meetup page. So please use any of those to send your comments and requests and questions to today's guest speaker, who is Carlos Sierra from our engineering office in Spain. And Carlos is going to show you some interesting, if you ask me, very, very interesting stuff about building JAX-RS applications, which are secured with OAuth. Carlos, you with us, I hope?
Yep, here I am. Hello, everybody.
Hey, here is Carlos. So it's you from now on, and tell us more about all those stuff.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. Thank you, Miljan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So as Miljan has told you, we are going to talk about JAX-RS applications and how to build them in a modular and configurable way using OSGi and the new whiteboard specification, which we have in Liferay, contributed to building most of the implementation. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can see my screen. Okay, so
yes, we can see your screen. At least I can. That means probably everyone else can.
Okay, cool then. So as I was saying, this whiteboard JAX-RS whiteboard specification that we have implemented and we are going to discuss today is a way for registering and using applications inside OSGi. As you guys might know, if you have used JAX-RS applications in other scenarios, you normally will have to have a web application or an application server in place, and you will have to deploy web XMLs and deploy servlets and stuff like that, and you need to build your application using code, because there's no other portable way in JAX-RS to build an application than to using this application type here. So one of the things that the whiteboard of OSGi brings us is that we can just build our application or compose our application just by registering services into the OSGi registry. So this is like an essential thing about the whiteboards is the way they allow you to just build stuff and thread stuff together and stitch things together just by registering services using and bearing different properties in their service registration. So in this case, this eases a lot building and composing the application for us. So as we can see, this is the specification page for the OSGi compendium release, the seventh version, version already, and this is online, so everybody should be able to check this. And you can go down here for the JAX-RS whiteboard specification. So here you can see that we can register just plain resources, okay, which is just the JAX-RS POJO in the service registry, and we can make this attached to different applications. We can also register whole applications, okay, in the just any static or standard JAX-RS application, and it will be deployed as well. And the best part is that we can augment these applications by using configuration and tossing resources and extensions, okay. Here, the extension is basically what it's called in JAX-RS jargon, a provider, which normally includes like context request filter, container request filters, message body writers, message body readers, or you name it, okay? The good part about this is that extensions can be replaced. So you have a way for setting extensions with a higher rank if you want to replace one of the other for an existing application. Or you can also sort them by your order of preference inside your application using just service properties. So this is quite handy. And there are a lot of properties available for doing this. Okay, and you can also do one very handy thing sometimes, that is that you can require also extensions, which is a very higher level thing, but it's very useful because in OSGi, it's all about dependencies. So you can have like low level dependencies at the class level, but you can also have a higher layer of dependencies, which in this case would be like a dependency on some specific extension that you might not be tied to statically. So for instance, if you depend on some type that you need to compile to, then that's for sure that you need to have that loaded into JVM. But for instance, sometimes you can depend on some dynamic extension, like we are going to talk about today. For instance, some filter that will make some kind of authorization, like it would be OAuth 2, for instance, that we are going to discuss. So in this case, your application is not gonna need a specific class to be available, but you still need some functionality on the runtime to be present in order for your application to work properly. And this is something you can achieve just using properties on the services, which is very cool, because otherwise you would need to write a lot of code in order to do this properly using other means. So this is basically what a whiteboard brings us. So I won't go much deeper today because we are going to introduce several tools that we are going to use to put together our application. So I don't want to overwhelm anybody just by going too deep into any of these, but I will go like an overview of all of them and how are we going to put them together. Okay, so this is and of course, you can go later to the different specs or different documentation, and you can also learn more yourselves. So this is basically the JAX-RS very height view of the JAX-RS specification, okay? And then what we are going to use to build our application together is the configuration, the declarative services, okay? I guess many of you are already familiar with declarative services, or they have talked to you about declarative services, but it's basically a way of handling components and a way of doing dependency injection between them. Not like a regular dependency injection, because the good part about OSGi and declarative services is that it's dynamic. And also, we are going to use a specific behavior today of declarative services, or a specific feature that it gives us, which is the support for factory configurations. Okay, so using the configuration admin service, which is another specification of OSGi, together with the declarative service, we can instantiate different instances of our classes bearing different properties. So we have a very fine control of what instances we have in our runtime just by creating different configurations for our classes using declarative services. So as we are going to see the next, having this available together with the whiteboard, it's a very cool way to compose applications just by changing configurations and stitching resources and extensions to applications using configuration admin. Okay, so this is a bit of an introduction. I will go a bit later and we will discuss OAuth2 a bit, but just a very, again, a very high level view of OAuth2, because that would kind of be a whole meetup for itself. Okay, so what we are going to use to present these tools is just a bare-bone OSGi framework, okay, which has only these dependencies in the beginning, okay? So it's just a very simple framework using login modules, configuration admin service, and we have a file install service to deploy, to hot deploy our bundles, okay? We have the annotation API, the JAX-RS specification API, because we are going to deploy JAX-RS applications. And we have, of course, the implementation of the JAX-RS whiteboard. We have this go shell, which is what you're looking at the moment. Okay, so I can write commands here. And this implementation of the JAX-RS whiteboard depends on HTTP whiteboard as well. So that's in order to create the HTTP layer. And we have here the OSGi dependencies, and not much more stuff. So declarative services, as we have said. And here there's a very small API provider for OAuth2, which we will go with it later. Okay, so for the moment, we don't even have any of our demo application in place. Okay, so in order to start, we're going to have a look at this very simple example application. Okay, so this is the very minimum unit of deployment that you can use in order to deploy an application using the whiteboard. Okay, you don't even need. Okay, so this is just a plain component. It registered as an application, which you can see here. This is a JAX-RS application type, okay? And this is the very minimum application you need to deploy. So if you're familiar with JAX-RS, you would normally will have to implement either this method, okay, or this method in order to get stuff registered in your application. Maybe you're using some other implementation specific or private specific, privative specific implementation that will do some class scanning or stuff like that, and will bring resources or providers into the applications. But normally, the only portable way specified in JAX-RS to create your applications is by statically creating the singletons or the classes that your application is going to have. But in our case, since we have available the JAX-RS whiteboard, we don't even need to do that. This is the minimum stuff that we can deploy into our framework, and this will bring us an application. Well, really not this simple because this application wouldn't do anything at the moment. So if we deployed this as it is now, then we wouldn't get anything, okay? So this is just how we're going to start. For testing our implementation, I'm going to use this advanced REST client. You can use any other REST client of your choice, or even you can use just your browser in order to do some testing, okay? So why we're going to do all this? Because our objective today, or our aim today, is to be able to develop our application using a very simple environment, okay, and then see how we can, just by being careful in our dependencies and using the bare minimum implementation to develop our application, then we can just take our application out of our development scenario and toss it into a production-ready environment and see how we can make it work even with totally different properties just by changing configuration files. Okay, so that's the idea. Okay, so just as we have this application, okay, we can, in order to make this application do something, because this doesn't have any logic here, we would need to add some endpoints or resources to this application. So this is typically done in JAX-RS by using these annotations. So in the case of the whiteboard, we can just add this annotation to any POJOs that we have, and we can register them with this property, OSGi JAX-RS resource true. So in this case, this is marked, and we just register this as an object, any object, because there's no interface in JAX-RS register for a resource. So we can just register this, and we get this functionality under data. So this will return this string, okay? So there's another property here that's very interesting, is which applications this service or this resource is going to attach to. So this is another property of the JAX-RS whiteboard. And as you can see here, we have a filter. So this is saying that any application that is in the whiteboard that carries or bears a property reading type equals private will have this resource attached. Okay, so this is very, very simple, and this is very, very handy to configure and to use. So why in this case type private? Because this is something that we have like private data, for instance, and we have some external means of authentication. So this is something that is not published to the outside using any public API. So maybe it's just some internal intranet or something like that. We have some means to hide this from the outside, so we don't need to worry about having any specific authorization filters in place, okay, for instance. But on the other hand, we can have also resources that read data and that are exposed to the public, okay? So in this case, we have this, which I call OAuth add-on, because this is going to use add-on a bit late, OAuth a bit later, in order to authorize our clients and don't let everybody read the data, because this API is going to be to the public. So that's why this is another resource, as we can see. But this resource is not going to attach to any application that we have said that is private, okay? Only to applications that are marked as public, okay? So same, the difference with the other one is that this endpoint is using this annotation here. So this annotation is related to OAuth because it's telling us that it's requesting a specific scope, okay, of OAuth 2. So let me stop a bit here in order to describe a bit what is OAuth. So OAuth 2 is just a web standard that allows some client or application to be granted access to some external resource on behalf of the resource owner. So the resource owner is typically a person, okay, that owns a mobile phone or has an application, an SPA, single page application on web, or something like that. Typically, today is a mobile phone. And we have some application in the mobile phone that needs to access some data on a different server, okay? So this application needs to get authorization from the resource owner, which is the person using the phone, to get data on his behalf. So we don't have like the typical post HTTP authentication screen. So we need this authorization. So OAuth 2 will get a token from an authorization server typically, and use that token from that moment on to authorize the requests on behalf of the resource owner. So the resource owner that doesn't have to authorize any further request anymore. So using that token, the application can act on behalf of the user. Of course, the tokens have a limited lifetime. They can be refreshed. And as I said to you before, OAuth 2 is like a humongous specification, and it's a really, really big specification. So we're not going to get into this today. But one of the things that OAuth 2 has is the scopes, which is basically a way to specify different levels of access in your API. So this is not something that you will do per user, because you will need to add permissions behind this in order to verify that the actual user that is accessing your application has the permission to access data. But this is like an access level for your API. So it's like you're piercing holes in your API of different sizes. So for instance, the client will have read access, but another client, if it's going to do a destroying, for instance, a destroy operation, should have a required scope of write. Okay, so this is why these two add-ons carry or bear this annotation here. So this annotation comes in a very tiny API, which brings nothing more than this annotation. Another requires no scope annotation, and that's all. So in order for our workbench to work, we need an implementation of this, but we are going step by step. So first of all, what we are going to do is deploy our demo application. So as we could see before, in the runtime, we still don't have application. So in order to be deployed, I just need to install it. And if everything works as it worked 5 minutes ago, we should get an application deployed, okay, into our runtime. Okay, so we have here demo applications already. Fine. So as you might know, we can inspect now using the tools in the Declarative Services. We can inspect the list of components that we have. And as you can see, we have this the same component that I told you about in the IDE, example application, example OAuth add-on, example OAuth write add-on, and example private add-on. So as you can see, all of them are enabled, okay, and they are satisfied, but they are not active yet. And why is that? Because they are not yet being used by anybody. Okay, as we discussed, the application has no resources, and none of these resources is being used yet because no application carries the properties that the resources are expecting. Okay, so this is why we have everything in place, everything ready in our application, but we still don't have anything wired yet. Okay, so now what we can do, this is where configuration admin comes in place. So every component, just by the fact that being a component, they have a corresponding configuration PID, which matches the fully qualified name of the class. So in this case, it would be like ORG my code example application. So I have in place here, I have this load directory where I'm tossing the files, and these are being get by file install into the runtime. So this is what I'm going to use to configure our runtime now. Okay, and build an application out of these small components that I showed you. Okay, so how can we start? So for instance, I can start telling the application, okay, that is going to be a private one. So I'm going to create an instance of our application which does absolutely nothing, and I'm going to put it in under some path, and I'm going to say that it is a private application, so it will get one of the resources attached. So let me look at my notes. So I have my notes here. So I should, for instance, get this example application so you can see what it is inside. Okay, so it's saying type private, okay, as this add-on expects, okay, type private. And it's going to be deployed, so this is a whiteboard property, it's going to be deployed under /private. So I forgot to mention that this runtime is running on localhost 8081. Okay, so now if I copy this file into load, here it is, I should eventually get an active copy of one active instance of my example application, and it's saying that I have an active configuration for this application. So I can even actually check what's the configuration of this instance, and it's saying that it's a component of this type and it carries these properties. So it's the application base is private, and it comes from this configuration, and it's of type private. And as you can see now, instead of having example private add-on only satisfied, it's also active now. Why is it? Because this application has pulled this resource into it. Okay, so now we should be able to reach this resource, which is data, okay, under the application under private, which is where we configured it using our advanced REST client. So we should be able to do private data, and we get the response from our resource. Okay, so we get private data. If I disable the configuration, okay, I wouldn't be able to see this. So I can just get rid of, I can get rid of this file, and I won't have the application deployed again. Okay, so I will have to deploy this. So as you can see, as you can expect, I'm gonna have some application, the same application deployed under public, but we don't have anything yet here. So we have a 404 not found because we still don't have any application deployed there. So, okay, I hope that you have followed me so far, because now what I'm going to do is to deploy the same application that we have here, so the same class, but deploy it with different configuration. So it should just create a different instance bearing different properties, and it will behave differently because the services that the resources that will attach are going to be the other two. Okay, so let's do that, and for that I will use another of my notes. Examples. So this is going to be the public instance. Let's have a look at it before. So as you can see here, it's of type public. and it's going to be deployed under OSGi JAX-RS application base. And for the moment, I'm commenting this property that will become handy later. Okay. So for the moment, I'm going to just deploy this configuration. And if everything is in place, then we have two applications. Okay. If we inspect them, sorry. Now we have a second one that it's deployed under public, and it's of type public. Okay. Now if we have a look, now the other two services are also active because they have been pulled by this second application. So if we go to our client, and I ask now for public scope, which is one of the endpoints that I have, I can see hello. Okay. And if I go to the other endpoint, which was destroyed, sorry, because this is post, as you can see here, right is post, okay, and read and scope is get, okay. So if I use post, then I can access both of these methods. So as you might be thinking that I lied to you because you might expect that we couldn't access these resources because these were going to be under OAuth 2, but we need to implement that. Okay, that's one of the next things that we are going to do. So right now, what we have seen is that we can just wire a JAX-RS application by tossing resources, POJOs, basically annotated POJOs with JAX-RS annotations into the OSGi registry. Using the proper properties, they will just wire an application together. So we can do the same thing using extensions. Okay, so for that, we have a different project here, which is our implementation of this scope, of this OAuth 2 scopes handling, okay, which I called scope container request filter. As you might already have guessed, this is a container request filter, okay, and this is a very simple extension that will check if the resources are bearing any requires a scope annotation. So it's basically a container request filter. We can see that I can use the JAX-RS context annotations in order to inject information from the runtime, from the JAX-RS runtime, like resource info or HTTP headers. So this is going to behave like any other JAX-RS extension or provider that we want to, that we might have implemented in a JAX-RS application. And we can just deploy it like any other component into the whiteboard, okay? So the different thing is that we now, instead of marking this as a resource, we need to mark this extension, okay? And in the case of the extension, there are a set of interfaces that you have to implement. So not everything can be an extension. So only the JAX-RS expected interfaces can be valid extensions in the JAX-RS whiteboard. Okay, so in this case, this extension is getting some configuration from the component. Okay, so from the Declarative Services. So this is something that you can do in order to get configuration. In this case, I'm checking if our filter is going to allow for missing annotations or not. Okay. So in the case that we don't allow for missing annotation, if a method is not annotated at all, then it's going to throw a 403. So the implementation of the filter will check for the resource info, which is injected by the JAX-RS runtime, and tells us which method is actually being reached by the client. So I'm checking if this method bears a required scope annotation, and in case that the method requires some scope, I will check for the authorization header, and I will see if the string that comes into the authorization header bears the specific scope I need. So this is a dummy implementation for the scopes, that it's in no way using the whole OAuth 2 protocol, but it's handy for me to check if my application is using the OAuth 2 scopes properly. And since we don't have like a big API to implement, it's very easy for me to just mock or create a dummy implementation in order for creating my application in my desktop or in my environment for development, and to be able to deploy very quickly and make a lot of changes. And I don't need to worry about anything else. So once we have this in place, we are allegedly going to be able to deploy this into a bigger system that has a full-fledged OAuth 2 implementation. That's what we're going to do later. So for the moment, we can see that our application has just started and we can reach the endpoints, but we're missing OAuth 2. So that's what I told you, that we can fix that by requesting our application that it can't start before we have an OAuth 2 implementation in place. So we can do that by changing the application properties. So this will go like public implementation. I will uncomment this one. So this is another property from the whiteboard that specifies that this application needs an extension with this property, okay, to be present and attached to the application, okay, in order to be able to be reached. So we are going to change this into true and see what happens. Okay, so now let's check the runtime. Now the application has this, and I can take a look at the application again. But now it is satisfied again, and the resources are not active again because the application now is not available, because the whiteboard is not pulling, has retracted the application, because now it needs it's saying that it needs an extension, but the extension is not there. So as we can see, we just changing properties in our services, we can change how our application behaves, and the application behaves gracefully. So this has retracted the resources, has retracted the application, and we didn't have to do anything. So we didn't have to take care of the cleanup ourselves. So now if we check our client again, then it says follow for not found. So how can we fix this? We can deploy first. We are going to deploy our implementation. So hopefully this will be deployed to our runtime. It should appear eventually. There we go. So now we can check. Okay, but we still don't have the application satisfied because it's not bearing the properties. As you can see, I didn't add the property that the application is waiting for as a default, but we can, as you might have expected, we can use a configuration again to configure our extension here and make it applicable for our application. As you might have noticed, in this case, we have a scope prototype. So this is something that it's very useful, and it's in the JAX-RS spec, in the whiteboard spec. And being a prototype, an extension will get, each application will get one different instance of the extension. Okay, so I'm not going to go much deeper into this, but you can check in the spec. But in the properties here, you get a specific property, which is OSGi JAX-RS application properties, in which you can get the properties that the application you have been attached to has. So you can react also from the extensions in order taking into account the properties of the application you have been attached to. And this is very handy for building complex complex systems, because you can adapt to the both using the configuration of the extension and also by reacting to the configuration of the application you have been attached to. Okay, so I didn't do that in this example in order to not make it too complicated. So let's have a look at how we can configure this, and I will again have a look at my notes. Okay, as you might remember, the fully qualified name of the class is the PID that we need to use for our configuration. So let's have a look at org my code scope container request filter. I don't know, I used one. Okay, so this is a possible configuration for this extension. Okay, so it will create the property that our application is expecting, and also it says that it will attach only to applications that have type public. So it won't ever try to attach to an application that says that it's private, because we have another means for authentication, as we have said before. So let's toss this one into our runtime. Okay, there we go. Now we have a new instance of a scope container request filter here, and now our application is active again. Okay, because now it has fulfilled all its high-level requirements. Okay, you might think, and it's true that it's difficult using this console to see the status of your JAX-RS application. Happily, the whiteboard brings, here you can see that the JAX-RS specification comes with a runtime that allows you to check the status of the system by inspecting the runtime DDOs. So basically, you can ask the JAX-RS runtime for a snapshot of how your application is wired. So using this method, you can get this runtime DDO information class, which brings all the information of which application have which resources, which extensions are attached to any application, if there's any application shadowing other application or an extension shadowing another extension. All that information is available here. Okay, so I also didn't get into that because I didn't want to make this too complicated or too deep. Okay, but you can also you could, for instance, build a web interface, or you could build a command here in order to dump the status of the runtime. Okay, so now that we have our implementation in place, then I will try to reach our endpoint again. Oops, this is unexpected. I would have expected this to. Oh, sorry. No, this is not. I have the the authorization there. Sorry. Okay, so now this is what it expects. Okay, that now the public scope, it's saying that you are not allowed. You are not authorized to access this scope, because now it is under our dummy implementation of OAuth 2. And also, if we try to post to destroy, then we are getting a 403 forbidden, because now our implementation is waiting for. Oops, here, no. It's waiting for an authorization. If you remember the spec, sorry, the implementation, it's waiting for the authorization header to just contain the name of the scope. And in this case, example OAuth, it's expecting a scope read, and OAuth write is expecting a scope of write. Okay. So with that information now, we can see that if we say blah blah here, it will still not work. If we access scope, it will still not work. But if we say blah, blah, read, blah, blah, then it will say, okay, but now if we go to post and go to destroy, we still say forbidden because we haven't granted the scope right. So we just say right, and then both endpoints are going to be available. Okay, so this is a very cool thing, I would say, that we can do just by having implementations and configurable implementations here, and then configure and wire them together just using properties to bind them together. Okay, so of course the implementation that we have here, it's a very dummy implementation. So we didn't get into OAuth 2 related stuff. But why didn't do that? Because in order to get OAuth 2 support, you need authentication, you need users database, you need storage for the client information, you need a lot of infrastructure for that. Okay, so it's not very handy to develop in those circumstances. Sometimes, in other times you don't have any other choice, but sometimes you might want to develop in a more slim runtime. So now what we are going to try is that we're going to deploy our application, okay, into Liferay, okay, which has the same. It supports the JAX-RS whiteboard, okay, and it has a full-fledged OAuth 2 implementation. So we can actually request a token, okay, and get the information out of it. So I have deployed our application before into Liferay, okay, and I have used this configuration that you can see here. So it's going to be OSGi, my code, sample application OAuth. So it's going to request for Liferay extension OAuth 2, and it's going to be deployed under demo, and it says that the scope checker that it's going to use is annotation. So it's going to behave like with the annotations that we have in our class. Okay, the good thing about the implementation in Liferay is that we can switch these scope checkers. So we can have different policies, or we can implement our own. The good part about the whiteboard is that anybody can implement any other policy, and they only need to react to a specific property here. So instead of annotations, we have methods, but you can have any other scope checker that you might like. So having this in place, we can go to Liferay now, which I have here started already. And then we should be able, if everything is in place, we should be able to go to OAuth 2 admin, and there we can create a client. Okay, the information of a client will typically involve having a client ID, a client secret. This all belongs to the OAuth 2 standard. Okay, so it has a name, a descriptive name, website when you can describe your application, description, and callback URIs. That if you are familiar with OAuth 2, these are very important. Okay, in order to fulfill the flows of OAuth 2. And here you can check the allowed authorization types that this application has. Okay, so now with this application in place, what I'm going to do is to use the token access point in Liferay to get a token for my application. So in this case, what I'm going to do is a post. So this is OAuth 2 already. This is the standard. Okay, I'm using one of the flows, which is one of the easiest ones. So I don't want to go very deep into any other flow. So you can use the grant type client credentials, which is something that you should use only under specific circumstances, and I'm using the application ID and secret. So this is why you can't use this flow in the open internet, for instance. But for the purpose of the demo, this should be enough. So I'm going to request a token for this application that I have described in Liferay. So I will ask it, and it says that I have this token string here, which I will copy, and it says it's token tag bearer, and the scopes that it has granted is write and read. So our application that is deployed into Liferay has these two annotations. So Liferay has introspected that, and they are available. So for instance, if I go into the configuration, I can assign the scopes I want for this. This is the name the JAX-RS whiteboard has given our application. I could have chosen a better name. Sorry for that. And there you can say, okay, this application can't access write. This is what we discussed. So in this case, it would only be available to read. Okay, so we could do that, and then we can go and use our token. So I'm going to try to use, so it's demo, right? So it's 8080, it's O, and now it's deployed under demo, and I will go try to reach scope, and it says forbidden. That's expected because I don't have now the authorization. It must be bearer, which is the type of the token, and the token. So now it says, okay, because I'm using the token that has this scope granted. If I fail to, it has to be the full token. It was a 9, isn't it? Yeah. And now the same thing goes with the other one, which is destroy. There you go. Okay, so this would be pretty much it. I hope it was something that made sense to you. I hope it was enough to learn something, and it was very complicated or very simple. I hope it has shown the things that you can do, putting together the JAX-RS whiteboard using configuration, the config admin, and declarative services. And I hope you enjoyed it and you liked it. And I'm open to questions if you want.
All right. Wait a second. I have no idea why I'm hearing myself. It shouldn't be. But... Okay. Yes. The sound is okay. Okay. If you guys can hear me, now is the time for you to ask your questions either on Slack channel, dev.life, or next to the YouTube video. Or under, depends on your layout on YouTube. Okay, and here is the first question from Jack Baker. How easy it is to change from localhost 8080 to some domain?
So what do you mean in our barebone, in our development runtime, or in Liferay?
Well, since it's 8080, I would assume it's Liferay.
So if it's the same as changing Liferay from, so you should go to the, so it's following the instructions in Liferay to change it from localhost to any other domain. So this is always when we're discussing about we're discussing Liferay, the JAX-RS. Let me share my screen again. So the applications deployed in JAX-RS are always under O. So when you deploy an application with a path, So like we deployed using demo in our properties, if you remember, then it's under O/demo. So if you change Liferay to a different host or a different port, then everything will change to that as well. So this is always relative to Liferay.
Right, and I guess we don't have the ability to scope those per instance or site.
Sorry, say that again.
Like we don't have the ability to actually scope those per instance or per site, right?
No, these are system-wide.
Right, but yeah. So to answer Jack's question, that is like if we have set up a virtual hosted Liferay, that should be working just fine.
So there's the ability to spawn different whiteboards, actually. But we haven't tested that together with Liferay, because I don't know how it will behave with the full-fledged application server. So the thing is, it could be theoretically possible to spawn several JAX-RS whiteboards, and you can target in your application. You can target several whiteboards. That would imply that you could have several ports, like different ports listening for connections. But I don't think that's a good idea to do with Liferay, because that you have the application server. But that's definitely something you could do with the smaller runtimes.
Right, and basically, if we have set up virtual hosts of Liferay, it should work.
Yeah, definitely. It should pick it up, because also if you have worked with JAX-RS before, the proper way to do, for instance, relative URIs is using the URI info. For instance, URI info, if I remember correctly. So this is it, URI info, which is something that JAX-RS gives you, and you have it available here, in which you can introspect all this stuff about the runtime, and you can get this URI builder. If I can't remember now, this base URI builder, which you can use to build relative links to other parts of your application. Okay, so you don't really need to ever use the absolute paths to reach application.
Okay. I'm not sure. Are you using speakers? Because I can hear my voice if it's you.
Sorry?
Are you on speakers or on headphones?
No, I'm on speakers.
That's why I hear myself. Okay, so Christoph was asking. He hasn't seen the confirmation part.
Oh yeah,
there should be one.
Oh, we haven't gone through the authorization screen, but it's there. I just use the client credentials, because using the authorization screen will involve it's more involved. So okay, yeah, you are telling me that. Yeah, thank you. They're bringing me some headphones. Thanks. Is it better now?
Yeah, I can't hear myself anymore, so it's good.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
So yeah, so you can use the authorization screen, but the problem with that is that it's more convoluted. So yeah, definitely you can change. So for instance, if we go to our example before, instead of using client credentials here, like I used, you can use, I can't remember now, it's access code or whatever credential, and it will give you a URL where you should reach with the access code, and then that URL will show the consent screen, and then it will redirect to the actual to the actual application with the token. But it's a more convoluted example. So let me If you don't mind, maybe we can leave it to the end and try. I don't know.
It's up to you, but I assume it's not that we missed to implement part of OAuth, but rather you just skip it for the demo. And I think this was the concern.
So it is it is there. It's in Liferay, definitely. So I haven't gone through it, but I can't remember now and I hadn't prepared it, so I can have a look at it if you want, but I will need some time. Sorry. But it's definitely implemented.
Okay, Thomas is posting a URL, but you probably can't see it on the YouTube channel. And I hope he's gonna tell us in a minute what he's meaning by that. I guess he's trying to help you out here.
Yeah, he's trying to make me remember. It's authorization code. I was checking my notes. So it should be client ID, authorization code, and okay, now I don't know if the application has. Let me just do a quick check. Maybe it has authorization code, web application. So, but yeah, we have. I don't know if this is online. We have an OAuth 2 test bed for in Liferay. I don't know. That might be what Thomas is.
All right, I guess we can put that for offline session, and I am about to reach to Thomas to ask him to do a security session anyway. So that would be a good way to discuss this in more details, I guess. Okay, any more questions? The obvious question I saw some time ago is, will the code be available someplace like GitHub or wherever?
Okay, so what I used for the demo is available already in ARIS. So this is a implementation that has been done as a project for Apache, and so is it? Yeah, this is it. So this is available already in GitHub under Apache, and you have an example here. So you can play with it if you want now. And also, if you grab, if I remember correctly, the next beta of Liferay, which is going to be beta 2, will also come with the whiteboard and the OAuth to support if memory helps. So
yeah. So for the for those of you who are rushing to try this, the OAuth is not yet released. So I mean, I guess if you get the latest master or whatever and compile it, it may be there, but it's not officially it's not in any official release yet. But it's going to be there very soon.
Yeah,
right?
It's merged as we speak. So it's been merged as we speak. So it will be there soon.
All right. I don't see any other questions. Let me double check again. I didn't miss anything. Okay, nothing on YouTube, and virtualizations we cover. Virtual host we did already. Okay, so no more questions in here. So I'm going to switch back to my screen. Thank you very much for today's session, Carlos. It was a really good one. I mean, maybe because I'm in particular very interested in JAX-RS and OSGi and OAuth and all those things. So, and I hope everyone else is satisfied with the amount of information that you presented to everyone. So thank you again. And okay, that was for today. And I still, as you know, probably from previous sessions, every time the session is about to end, I have an announcement to make. And this is no different this time. The next dev.life session will be Liferay Commerce for Busy Developers, presented by Marco Leo, who is our commerce team lead, and it's going to be on June 22nd. So you're all welcome to join us. And until then, happy coding, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys.